Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, that's a name you probably know, right? Maybe from an English class way back when. But what if I told you he wasn't just some dusty old poet from New England? What if he was actually a full-blown intellectual rebel? Someone who called for a total revolution of the American mind? Yeah, let's get into it.
So, listen to this. This isn't just some nice-sounding line from a speech. This is a Declaration of Independence, Part 2. Think about it. It's 1837. America is politically free, sure, but culturally, intellectually, it was still constantly looking over its shoulder at Europe, basically waiting for permission to have its own ideas. Emerson was the guy who stood up and just said, "We're done with that."
And that call to arms was aimed squarely at what he saw as a massive problem. You had this young, energetic nation, but its thinking, its art, its philosophy, it was all imported. It was basically a second-hand culture.
He did not pull his punches. Emerson called it the sluggard intellect of America. He said the country was being fed on the sere remains of foreign harvests. I mean, what a burn, right? He saw a nation of brilliant people who weren't creating their own thoughts, just reheating leftovers from other cultures. Which brings up a pretty big question. How do you even begin to fix that?
So how does a person, or an entire country for that matter, break free and learn to think for itself? Well, Emerson's answer wasn't some quick fix or a self-help guide. It was more like a curriculum, a school of thought with three very powerful and maybe surprising teachers.
First up, nature. And listen, he didn't just mean, go for a pleasant walk in the woods. For Emerson, nature wasn't just pretty scenery. It was the primary textbook of the universe. It's where you could go to read the truth for yourself, with no filter, no middleman.
What he's saying here is pretty profound. He believed that the laws that govern the universe, physics, biology, all of it, are actually reflections of the laws that govern our own minds. So when you study the patterns in a spiral galaxy or a seashell, you're not just learning about the outside world. You're actually discovering a blueprint for yourself.
Okay, next up, books. The wisdom of the past, all written down. Now, you'd think a great thinker like Emerson would put books on a pedestal, right? But, and this is a big but, he gives a serious warning. He says books can actually be dangerous. How radical is that? He's saying books are for when you're feeling a little lazy, a little uninspired. They're meant to be inspiration, a spark, not a script to follow. The second you let a book do your thinking for you, the moment you become a follower instead of a creator, your own genius gets, as he says, subdued by his instruments. And that brings us to the final, absolutely crucial teacher in this school of thought, action. You can't just be a passive observer, sitting in a library or staring at a tree. You have to live. You have to get your hands dirty, engage with the world, and make things happen. Think about what this means. Every single experience you have, your job, your relationships, your successes, your failures, that is the raw material for original thought. He says that our actions at first are too tangled up with our lives to make sense of, but over time they ripen and fall away like a ripe fruit to become a thought of the mind. In other words, your life is the curriculum.
So, you've learned from nature, you've used books as a spark, and you've thrown yourself into action. According to Emerson, this whole education, it all funnels down to one single incredibly powerful idea, a central commandment that is the absolute core of his entire philosophy. And that idea is self-reliance. Now, this isn't about being arrogant or selfish. It's about having this deep, unshakable trust that there is a spark of universal truth of the divine that exists right inside of you. It's the conviction that your deepest, most authentic gut feeling is your best guide, better than any book, any expert, any trend, or any crowd. And this right here, this is the immediate result of trusting yourself. If you are truly listening to that inner voice, you literally can't just follow the crowd. You have to become a nonconformist, not because you're trying to be different, but because you're trying to be true to yourself. This is maybe one of his most famous lines. And man, it's a gut punch. It's so direct. Every single second you spend wishing you had someone else's life or trying to copy someone else's path, you are actively killing off the unique, powerful thing that only you can be. You are abandoning, as he puts it, that plot of ground which is given to him to till. So what this does is it sets up this huge clash of values. On one side, you have society. Emerson says society tends to measure you by what you have, your stuff, your job title, your reputation. It demands that you conform, and it worships old traditions. But the self-reliant individual,
They play a different game. They measure themselves by who they are, valuing their own authentic voice and what they experience directly, right here, right now. Okay, so this all sounds fantastic for a guy in a top hat in the 1830s, but what about us? We live in a world of social media feeds, of constant noise and information overload. Do these ideas even make sense anymore?
Let's just ask the question straight up. In a world that is screaming at us to conform, to chase likes, to follow the next trend, isn't Emerson's call for self-reliance and tuning into your own voice more critical than it's ever been? I'd argue, absolutely yes.
So here's the toolkit he left for us. He's telling us to trust our gut over the so-called authorities, to get out there and actually do things instead of just theorizing about them. He's begging us to stop the endless comparison game and define success on our own terms. And maybe the most important one for today, have the courage to stand alone if you have to, because, as he says, isolation must precede true society. You have to know who you are before you can truly connect with others.
And I want to leave you with this last thought, because it's a real challenge. We spend so much of our lives trying to get comfortable, to be secure, to be settled. But Emerson comes along and says that hope and growth and everything that makes life worth living, it only really happens in those moments when we're unsettled, when we're questioning things, exploring, and refusing to take the easy answer. So the question he leaves us with is, how much are you willing to be unsettled?